Jazzcast Pros.
How long should you be spending time in sales, specifically prospecting, in your business every week? How long do you think, when I was a full-time salesperson, how long do you think that I spent actually selling every week? If you think it was 40 hours, you were wrong. If you think it was 30 hours, you are wrong. If you think when I was a full-time salesperson that I spent 20 hours a week actively prospecting and selling, you are wrong. This episode, we are going to talk about the power of an hour, and I'm going to dive into what my sales process looked like, specifically around prospecting, and I'll get into why I really want to focus on that for this episode, and then what it kind of looks like now in my business. I know I have shared that, but I really want to focus on the power of an hour and how being really intentional with 1 hour can transform your business. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the cautiously ambitious woman, remove mental barriers and take action now so that you can achieve your high vibe desires. I'm Rashawn, your high vibe curator, cheerleader, and accountability partner. As a wife, a mother, and an entrepreneur who recently quit my job to follow my dreams, I understand why you may be hesitant to throw caution to the wind and take that leap. So let's get into it. So the power of an hour. So in my business, I do what I call prospecting power hours. I have shared this journey before, but I will share it again. When I was in sales for a software company, my full-time role was sales, and we didn't have a big team, and we weren't all centrally located, and so I kind of had to do my own thing, and there wasn't a big formal training program with it. I had to do a lot of education myself. And so my boss said the most effective way for us to grow our business is by cold calling. So Rashawn, your time needs to be spent cold calling. And that was kind of it. I mean, we did have some strategy sessions around what cold calling looked like and doing some role playing and things like that. But I really went in and dove into the education of prospecting and cold calling myself. And we shared some scripts, but one of the things was that the way that other people in the company sold wasn't authentic to how I sell. And so in a previous episode, I talked about how selling is a science and an art, and the script in which you use and the verbiage that you use, that's the art part, because that's how you're going to go from action into things that feel aligned with you. So when I first started, I would make between 8 and 10 cold calls a day, and it would literally take me all day. I mean, I was at work from 8:30 to 4:30, and I would make 8 to 10 cold calls in that amount of time. And it's because my process was not good. So I would come in and I would maybe I should call this person and I can call that person, or maybe I should call this person. And then when you don't create a process around it, your brain's going to talk you out of stuff real quick. When I started to look at what other people would do, it was you're making 10 cold calls a day. That's not good. And so what would happen is I would sit down and I would make my list and be oh, I guess I could call this person. And then I would look them up and I would do some research and figure out and as I was doing that, I was actively talking myself out of doing that, of making the cold call. There was this friction of my process. I preach and preach and preach. There's this book called Fanatical Prospecting. It changed my life when it comes to prospecting and really helped me hone in on my process of prospecting and the mindset piece, because 80% of prospecting is mindset. Like I said, I would talk myself out of it. Real quick, I want to dive into why I think prospecting is the key to you growing your business. When you think of sales and you think of what I need to get better at in sales, a lot of what you may think of is I need to get better at overcoming objections. I need to get better at closing the deal. I need to get better at negotiating. I need to get better at my sales presentation even. And I can say that that is important, but it is the last 20%. If you do not fill your funnel, if you do not prospect, you will never get to that part of the process. And so that does not matter. So until your funnel is full and you are actively filling your pipeline in a way that works, that stuff does not matter. So going back to my journey, I was doing 10 cold calls a day, and I was literally so drained and exhausted and frustrated and overwhelmed. And, we started to increase our KPIs, key performance indicators of okay, you need to be making 100 cold calls a week. And I was doing 10 a day. So I was at 50 a week, and that's all I was doing. That's not very powerful. So getting back to the power of an hour, I really honed in on my process. I was making about 20 cold calls an hour, and that was my KPI towards the end, was to make 250 cold calls a week. And again, that wasn't even necessarily my KPI for my boss. That was the KPI that I saw, okay, if I make 250 cold calls a week, I'm talking to about 10 people, I'm setting up about 4 to 5 sales calls, and I'm closing 1 to 2 of those people. So I knew the math, so when I first started, I was making 50 cold calls a week. That's all I was doing. I had little time in my day to do anything else. And then when you actually set up a meeting, now you're taking that meeting, which means you're making less cold calls, because the time that you would be making those cold calls, you're prepping for the meeting, you have the meeting, you're sending follow-up information, you're following up with those people. And so anytime you actually get yeses to any part of the sales process, now you're taking away from your cold calling time, which, if you dig into sales, that doesn't have an effect for tomorrow or even next month. It has a big effect 3 months from now. So I was going to, 10 cold calls. And so my boss was we need to be making 100 a week. Because at that point, I think there were 3 salespeople. So, okay, let's do 100 a week. And I'm where am I going to find this time? And so my next boss that I was working with around sales, he was amazing. He knew his stuff. He knew the process. He was actually a marketing director, but he knew the process of sales really well and knew how to get me to figure out how to make the sales process better so that I could hit the numbers that I wanted to hit. And he was really helpful in not saying, here's what you need to say. It's here's the objective. How can you say it in a way that works for you? Because some people aren't, and also some people aren't going to buy via cold calling. There are other avenues that we can try to market and sell and create brand recognition. But again, if you're making 10 cold calls and it's taking you all day, you don't have time to do anything else. In a previous episode, I did talk about the power of the CRM, and that is the first piece of the puzzle in creating a powerful prospecting hour. And so when you have the CRM, that takes a lot of your busy work out of it. Oh, who should I call today? It's no, here's my list. Here's who I'm going to call. I have my script. Let me knock this out of the park, and then create when I'm going to follow up with them again, any notes. It's very detail and process oriented. It's an interesting balance, because one of the things that support my ADHD is the dopamine hits of ooh, I'm checking things off. Ooh, I'm doing this stuff. The negative part is the admin, okay, spoke to this person. Here are notes here. The data entry is not dopamine filling at all. And so kind of gamifying that and figuring out ways to create dopamine or rewards around that part of it was really important. Your CRM is so important to put in place in this process. And if you go back and listen to that episode, start with an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to go out and buy expensive software. An Excel spreadsheet is a perfectly capable app for you to use when you're starting out with your CRM. So get your CRM and start figuring out how you can prospect 15, 20 people in an hour. in that world, in that arena, I was calling on car dealers. And so I knew specifically who I was talking to, who I was targeting, what I was going to tell them. What was already laid out. All the pieces that needed to be in place were already in place. I didn't have to figure those out. And so as an entrepreneur, a lot of times you're figuring out what puzzle pieces those are. Equation. You're figuring out what the equation looks like as an entrepreneur. When I was in sales, that equation was already laid out for me. Does it make it more difficult? Yes. Is it still worth your time? Yes. What does it look like for me now? So what it looks like for me now is not cold calling. I'm not getting a list of, 20 small businesses and calling them up and saying, hey, I'm Rashawn. Are you looking for any accountability or support in your business from a community? That's what I have. I'd love for you to join us. That's not what I'm doing. In that arena, cold calling was helpful. Do I think it would be helpful right now? I don't know. The other ways that I have found to prospect excite me more and are working, so I'm going to continue with that. There's a lot of ways that you can set up like marketing funnels and sales funnels, like ClickFunnels or like those types of apps that turn people from website visitors into people in your email list. And then you create a campaign for those people so they get information from you to build know, like, and trust. How I am doing it right now is very conversational. And so what does a power hour look like for me right now? Well, first I want to go back to like the power of an hour. So when I was doing that, I was cold calling 20 people an hour-ish. If my KPI was 250 cold calls a week, I was cold calling between 12 and 13 hours a week. So it's like 2.5 hours a day. But it create the fact that I can create those sorts of results and package them into 1 hour sprints. Like a lot of times I would do 1 hour in the morning from like 10 to 11 because that's when a lot of GMs of dealerships were just kind of getting in. Their day wasn't super busy yet. They were just opening up their email. And then I would do like 1 to 2 because they were just getting back from lunch. And again, their day hadn't picked up yet. 1 to 2, I would also target more like office managers. Mornings would be service directors. So kind of catering the day to based on who I was calling. That was like the 2 hours a day. And then on Thursdays, we would do like a 3-hour sprint where all of us would like cold call for 3 hours. Anyways, that was my schedule. And so in those 12 hours, I got all my KPIs done and I was focusing on the input because I had done the back end work of knowing that that's what I needed to hit to get the outcome that I wanted. At one point I was making 100 cold calls a week and I was like to my boss, like, hey, I'm making 100 cold calls a week. Like that's a lot and I'm still not getting what I need. He's like, okay, try 150. And I tried 150 and it still wasn't it. Okay, try 200. Tried 200. It was like better, but okay, try 250. And that was what consistently got me to where I wanted to be and hitting my sales goals that I wanted. And he wasn't like, oh, that's a lot. Like, thank you so much for trying. Like, you're doing so good. He's like, okay, try something different. But it created so much freedom for me because I could package these things that at the end of the day, they're not fun. Like cold calling is not fun. Prospecting is not, typically it's not all that enjoyable. Even if you're prospecting like at a farmer's market, you're sitting there and you're waiting for people to walk by and you're making awkward small talk and you're like looking at people, but then not wanting to look at people because you don't want them to think like they have to come over and then like they're not looking at you because they don't want to like engage if they don't even know what you're selling yet. And so it's like a lot of time of like this really awkward engagement, then if you have a booth or you're at a networking event or any of those interactions, like it's not super comfortable, but it is powerful. You think about if you're at a farmer's market and you have that one really good conversation or you have someone who like buys a subscription or like has the need exactly what you're looking for. It's so exciting. And so if you can package that awkwardness into a short amount of time and build so much more freedom to do the more fun things in your business, That is powerful. That is how I live into being the relaxed entrepreneur. That is how I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend 5 to 7 hours a week prospecting. And for my business at the moment, that is enough. And I have so much more freedom to do the things that I want. And I can prospect between 15 and 20 new people a week. My conversion rate for what I have right now is much higher than when I was working calling car dealers. I get told F you quite a lot less. What was funny is when I would call like the southern states and like they were rude to me in like a southern way. And I was like, you just said F you to me, but in the South. Thank you. So it's so nice that I can look back at that time and just laugh because it was quite a journey. Anyways, now I can prospect between 5 and 7 hours a week, and that's enough for my business. If I did need to ramp it up, I know that I could. But, one of the things that I have purposely really built into my business is that if Rowan has an event or I have girlfriends in town or I want to take a Friday off, like there's no guilt around any of that because I can pick up and move those hours and it's not like, oh my God, I need to take a Friday off, but then what am I going to do the rest of my cold calls? Like that's a huge chunk of my time. It just creates this like breath of air into your business. And so if you can really hone in on the process and do a prospecting sprint for 1 hour a day for your business, you will see a tangible difference. Even if you hear a lot of no's, even if you hear a lot of crickets, you're going to work out ways that it feels good to talk about it, that feels less clunky, and you're going to start to have conversations and you're going to start to figure out things that work or don't work or feel good or don't feel good, and you're going to trip up on your words and you're going to say the wrong thing, and then you're going to get out of it and be like, well, I'm not going to say that again. And you're just going to get better and better and better. And so there is so much power in an hour, especially around prospecting. One thing that it is hard to do, especially as an entrepreneur, when I was in business, it's like, okay, how many did you make this week? Let me go into your CRM and look how many calls you made. Now the only person answering to that is me. I like to do those during my co-working hours. I also run sales challenges in the community. If you follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, I'll share when those are so you can join one. And again, it's just an hour a day of like head down working on growing the business. And it is so powerful. I think I need to get back to what it looks like for my business right now. The majority of time I spend prospecting is on LinkedIn. That is working really well for me right now. I spent a lot of time on Instagram and that didn't create the results that I wanted. So I did switch to LinkedIn. I am still spending time on Instagram. I still love engaging on that platform. But again, wasn't producing the results that I wanted. So I tweaked it. So right now it's a lot of LinkedIn. One of the really nice things that, because I have found that LinkedIn works really well, I can do 5 to 7 hours a week on LinkedIn. That's enough. I have started tweaking with cold pitching on email. There's a lot of like trade shows and craft fairs and things like that where a lot of my prospects show up. And so now I'm spending a couple hours a week trying out cold pitching for emails for those people. If it produces, awesome. If it doesn't, it didn't take away from my core prospecting time that I'm still investing in on a weekly basis. One of the nice things about doing prospecting power hours is that it does give you, again, freedom to try different things, try different tactics. Maybe you want to go to a busy marketplace in your town and just start handing out business cards, or you want to go to the trade shows and hand out cards and start conversations with people. Maybe you want to try out a new networking event. You just want to try different things. And with that freedom and space in your schedule, you have the capacity to do so, which is really cool. So that's what I'm doing in my current business. One of the other nice things about trying different things, right now LinkedIn is working for me really well. And if LinkedIn were to go down tomorrow, going out and trying these different streams of prospecting, I will know which ones have worked and which ones don't so that I can build those up. If you like this podcast, I would love if you gave us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to. Build in a couple hours a week to prospect. It will change your business. If you have any questions about prospecting and what it could look like for your business, if you want to brainstorm any of that at all, please reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff. I think it's so powerful. I think it will transform your business. And I think you have the capacity to do it. I really think you can. So until next time, remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life.